So we were talking about self-care and taking care of our health, and I absolutely 100% believe that. I think if we feel good in our bodies, it's going to translate to other parts of our life. So if your big goal is just drink half your weight in water,
yes,
that is what I'm working. That's what I'm working on, because I'm such a coffee addict that I'm not getting enough water probably, and even with all the exercise that I do, I'm not drinking enough water. A couple more areas where moms tend to feel guilty is that we're not spending enough time with the other kids in the family, because there's so many appointments, therapies, ABA therapists at the house, or appointments at school or wherever. I mean, you could be in the post-school phase, and that also can be very demanding. Yes. And then not spending enough time with our spouse.
Definitely.
You know, making date nights intentional. We tend to often think that the affected child, whether we say it out loud or not, is more important than our spouse. Which
I made the mistake of saying it out loud. And maybe not even the affected child, just the idea that children didn't ask to be here. You know, they need us versus like, you know, a 47-year-old man, he's okay, he's fine.
Yes.
And that's not fair, and that's not okay. And we love our husbands, and they're such a valuable part of this discussion. And so I have tried to be more intentional about making sure that I acknowledge the time that we need together. Yes. And during that time, because that's the other thing, we've tried to carve out the time, but then I spend the time updating on the kids. And so I don't know if that's
so romantic.
I know.
Really?
The date night is spent.
I know. It's like you have to make a deal. We're not talking about kids' schedules
or calendars. I mean, I've pulled out a calendar, you know, at a restaurant.
Right.
And so I'm working. I'm work in progress. But our spouses, I'm sure don't get enough time and maybe even enough space to share how they feel about this unique journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think we've covered a lot of things on our list. I think let's talk about, well, we didn't even talk about like feeling guilty about organization and cleaning and keep up and laundry and all of that, but that ties in there too. I feel these days I am just not into cooking. I feel like I've been in a long phase of not really loving the Monday through Friday cooking. I love having people over. I love the holidays, but you know, I feel guilty about that, you know, but sometimes prepackaged salads are just fine.
And I feel guilty because time is such a factor in the life of any mom. So sometimes cooking things that are quick and easy feel more expeditious, but then I'm concerned about the medical welfare of all of my children.
Sure.
And so then I feel like, no, I need to be cooking things that are healthier and more organic.
Yes. Everything organic and everything from scratch.
No. Everything from scratch. You know, Pinterest has not helped in any way. And so there's those comparisons that we're drawing, and they're just, you know, very unreasonable expectations that we leverage against ourselves and others. And for those of you that have school-age children, I mean, if you can get those kids from, you know, home to school and back to home again, and homework and activities, and then you do factor in the therapies, and, you know, many of us have, you know, more than one child, it's a wonder that anybody is surviving. You know,
anybody's fed.
Anybody's fed. I'm sure somebody didn't get fed. So, yes, I am probably not the best homekeeper, but I can organize all of my kids' lives like a phenom. So that's my superpower.
That's what you celebrate.
That's what I have to learn to celebrate.
Yeah, and we're going to get to expectations, because that's a huge part of this. Let's talk about what actually is guilt. We call it mom guilt, mommy guilt. Guilt relates to others. It involves an awareness that our actions have actually injured somebody else. That's real guilt.
Yeah.
So I yell at my kids and I feel badly because of that, because I hurt somebody's feelings, or I scared them, or whatever. You know, that was not a good modeling experience of frustration. So yes, that's real guilt. That is something that we do need to apologize. We do need to humble ourselves.
Feeling of responsibility
Yes.
for something that we did.
Right. Remorse for some offense. But a person can also turn that into self-loathing.
Shame.
And now we get into shame.
Definitely.
And so shame relates to ourself, how we feel about ourselves. Brene Brown, who I absolutely love, says it's the fear that we are not good enough. It erodes our courage and fuels disengagement, which leads to isolation because we feel like we are not good enough. And everyone else has nailed motherhood. Everyone else has Pinterest
they got it all figured out.
Motherhood. Yeah.
I think they all have housekeepers, but
they must have housekeepers or sitters
I mean
or
like a team of people.
staff.
They have a staff.
Yes. And shame is destructive. It is destructive. Yeah. Guilt can motivate you to actually change a behavior or a habit, but shame just is its own prison.
I agree. And I think that when you look at moms who've had children that were born with whatever sort of challenge, I think the guilt can go as far back as the birth plan kind of gone awry. You know, we have this vision for how everything is supposed to be.
Yes.
And in many cases, a medical diagnosis has nothing to do with what the mother did or didn't do, or even what happened in the first few weeks after the child was born.
Sure.
And, but I think because as moms, we identify as inherent protectors of our kids from the earliest stage, from you know, the onset of conception. It was our job. That that's where the guilt tips over to shame. You know, because that's something that was very much outside of our control.
Absolutely.
The guilt, yes, if I yell at my kid unreasonably for something outside of, you know, disproportionate to what they did, I'm responsible for that. But a rare condition impacting the nerve behind my son's left eye.
No, that has nothing to do with
not
you.
responsible for that. No. And yet, in society, we inherit that sense of responsibility, and I think that's where the guilt tips over to shame.
I agree.
And we start to draw comparisons. We begin to self-loathe. We question our identity as mothers. And that's a slippery slope to depression, to lack of self-care, because, you know, why care about yourself at that point? You're cycling into this phase of, I just have to fix this thing that I supposedly caused when we didn't.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's really, really important what we're saying is to distinguish between guilt and shame.
Yes.
Is it guilt or is it shame that we carry around? Like we said, guilt can motivate you. In a positive way. Shame paralyzes you. It's debilitating.
Well said.
I think we've touched on expectations a few times. So I think that is a huge part. I think we should definitely mention that role.
And many of them are self-imposed.
Yes.
I have suggested that the expectations came from others, came from my spouse, came from, you know, family, came from friends. But when I really began to dissect those expectations, nobody had said any of that to me. Nobody said all of the laundry had to be put away. Nobody said, you know, why can't you ever make it anywhere on time because you're juggling all of these kids. Nobody has said that to me. My internal voice is saying that to me. I have these expectations that I have drawn from, I don't even know, like almost childhood television shows or something. I mean, when I was in college, you know, my friends still tease me. I had all 5 of my kids' names picked out. I had decided like how many kids I was going to have, and you know who I was going to marry, and what this was going to look like, and it was an ideal, a picture perfect scene, and that voice is what has been implanted in my head. And these self-imposed expectations have really worked against me.
I call myself a recovering perfectionist because, you know, I realized several years ago just how much I placed. Everyone told me my whole life, you're so hard on yourself, you're so hard on yourself, and I was poo-poo it and dismiss it. And I always thought a perfectionist was someone who was master's educated, completely type A their entire life, whatever. So I was like, no, I'm not a perfectionist. And then when you talk to a therapist, you realize, oh gosh, maybe I am. Maybe this comes from family background and wanting everything to be perfect or look perfect or have everything nicely controlled, and you have these really high ideals, I think, when you come from a broken family. I think, that can come from a lot of places. So sometimes we are subject to what family or friends say to us.
We can be,
certainly.
And it might
we
be
hear
because
messages from mothers or mothers-in-laws.
think they're saying, but they are.
Yes. Certainly our current culture that seems to be obsessed with the Pinterest perfect motherhood. I think we do have a movement that's starting to sway away from that. But we are inundated with the internet and blogs and social media. Think about our mothers. They didn't see what everybody else was doing with their motherhood role. Now everyone's displaying it.
Sees it. And they all look so happy. I mean, I think that's actually the inherent part. There's no video or post of someone pulling their hair out or, sobbing in the shower. They actually look really happy negotiating what should be a very hectic life.